Good afternoon. How are you all doing? It's so wonderful to be here with you all and to talk about the subject that we're very passionate about. So Dean and I are husband and wife, and we are neurologists and scientists. And for the past 20 years, we've studied the brain and specifically about unleashing the potential of this incredible organ. So very excited to be here and share our thoughts and ideas with you.
There's a self-selection process going on right now. For those that came here, they're incredibly cognitively attuned to come to the most important talk of this session.
Yes, kudos to you all.
Yeah, kudos. So with that, we start with the most important organ there is. For the cardiologists, nephrologists, all the rest, I'm so sorry. We are a brain. Yeah. It's the most important organ because it is us. It's our identity. It's who we are. And this is the century of the brain. Why? Because we're beginning to learn so much about the brain. And we have so many tools to make a difference in the transitions and growth of the brain as we get older. And it's critically important. But at the same time, it's critically important with the age that we are in, where information is dispersed everywhere, all kinds of information, that we separate pseudoscience from science, the gimmick from reality. So that's what we've been doing for the last 20 years. Our first conversation when we first met 20 years ago was about brain health, about our two grandparents who died from Alzheimer's. And that's where the journey started. So this little brain, 3 pounds, 2% of your body's weight, consumes 25% of your body's energy, is the center of everything that you are. We can replace any body part, you'll still be that person. You replace your brain, guess what happens? You're that other person. The brain has 87 billion neurons, and each of the neurons can make 1 or 2 connections, or as many as 30 to 50,000 connections. There's the secret, right there. No gimmicks, you don't need to add butter to your coffee, none of that stuff. There it is, connections, connections, connections. So we're gonna start with that because we have tremendous power to make a difference, not in preventing disease. We've been talking about prevention for the last 15 years. Prevention is part of it, but more important than prevention is optimizing brain health, because if you do optimize the brain health, prevention is going to happen in 80% of brain diseases. The number varies from disease to disease. Today we'll talk about one of the diseases, but actually we can translate that to many of the brain diseases. The journey you see here is 2 curves. The path less traveled is the blue one. Most of us travel the brown or black line, which is early on in life, our journey starts with a cognitive state, a cognitive reserve that's less than it can be. I'm talking about the first few years of life. As much as we study more than 20,000 Alzheimer's patients, we say the most important years of health are the first 5 years of health. Those first 5 years determine the brain health go down the line, as far as social, economical, everything. So that's a little nuance that I want to put in. So it starts very early. But at any stage of life, we can make a tremendous difference in that trajectory, in that growth, and that resilience that we can build. And that's what we need to do today. Before we talk about the success and what we can do, there's a tsunami. Alzheimer's. But it's not just about Alzheimer's, it's dementias. Dementia is the big category, the umbrella category. It's cognitive decline to the extent where you can't do your daily activities. Alzheimer's is a subtype. It's 60 to 70% of all dementias, and it's rapidly growing. It's the number 5 cause of mortality, morbidity in the US, number 1 in UK, number 1 in Japan, and it will be number 1 in the United States. But, and it's rapidly increasing. But more important than Alzheimer's, it's all of dementias and cognitive decline that starts much earlier. You're going to hear this theme over and over again because it gives you the power to make a difference as early as possible. Every 64 seconds, somebody's being diagnosed with Alzheimer's. That's not consistent across the board in all communities. We currently lead the largest brain initiative in the country in Southern California. In different communities, the numbers are different because access to information, to resources are different. And right now, 6.7 million Americans suffer from Alzheimer's. And worldwide, more than 45 million, and the number is going to grow. By 2050, it's 12.7 million in the US and 135 million worldwide. That's just Alzheimer's, not vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, Parkinson's dementia, frontotemporal lobe dementia, strokes and vascular dementia, just Alzheimer's. And the cost of Alzheimer's alone is overwhelming. We're talking about the second costliest disease in America is heart disease at $120 billion. Alzheimer's alone, direct cost $345 billion, indirect cost another $330 billion, and that number is going to go above $1.5 trillion if you count direct and indirect costs in the next 20 years. And by itself will overwhelm our healthcare system. And the focus is still on that one pill, the magic pill, which will not be the answer. The answer is going to be in your homes, your communities, and that's where we want to focus on. Now, the question that always comes up is genetics. Is Alzheimer's a genetic disease? Everything has genetic component, even your behaviors. How you drive has a genetic component. Every aspect of your life, but genetics have different penetrance. Huntington's disease has 100% penetrance. It's a terrible disease that if you have the gene on chromosome 4, you're going to get it no matter what. You might be able to move the dial a little bit here and there, but that's 100% penetrance. The percentage of Alzheimer's that's driven by 100% penetrant genes is 3%. Those three genes are APP, presenilin-1, and presenilin-2. The rest of the genes are what they call epigenetic expression, meaning genes with environment combined. The combination have an effect. The second highest penetrance gene is ApoE4. How many people here know about ApoE4? Well, more than usual in our meetings, yes. So if you have one gene, you have 4 times the risk of developing Alzheimer's. If you have 2 genes, one from each parent, your risk is 12 times as high. But guess what? Of those that had 2 genes, 50% never develop Alzheimer's. Why? I'm going to give the clue here. Lifestyle. So what is the function of ApoE4? We just did a podcast, Brain Health Revolution. Listen to our podcast. Comprehensive talk on ApoE4. ApoE4's job is to transport lipids. One of its jobs. It's multiple jobs. One of transport lipids. That's a clue right there. So the genetics of Alzheimer's has to do with your ability to respond to life's challenges. The genes are genes with waste disposal, with glucose metabolism, with lipid metabolism, with oxidation, and all of these things. So if you have bad genes, you will do a bad job of responding to these things throughout life. If you have good genes, you'll do a great job of responding. So there are genetic risks that have to do with lifestyle. This curve is very important. The earlier we start, the more we can do as far as forestalling the disease, but more importantly, continually to expand cognitive capacity. We thought that the disease process starts when you first have memory problems. It doesn't. It starts 20, 30, 40 years earlier. But the good news is, short of having had developed Alzheimer's, you can, short of that, even at MCI stage, even at early mild dementia stage, people can actually reverse the disease process. Now, here's a very important point. There's a lot of people out there in social media that are selling pills and vitamins and all of these things and are promising that they can reverse Alzheimer's. And when we wrote our 2 books, we were said that if we just hint at the fact that you can reverse Alzheimer's, you'll sell 2 million extra books. We said we can't. That's not the case. We're playing with people's hopes. Once somebody has fulminant Alzheimer's, you can affect the process. You can slow it down, but you can't reverse this. The damage is too much. But prior to Alzheimer's, there's so much you can do to reverse. And there's tremendous amount of data that shows that, and we've been actually involved in that research. Now, evidence for prevention.
So the good news is there's a lot we can do. And there's been so many incredible studies that have been done throughout the years that show us that when people opt for a healthy lifestyle, they can slow down this wear and tear that occurs in our body, and especially in our brain, which is one of the fastest growing and very, very active organs in our body. And there's tremendous number of studies and cohort and observational studies that have for a very long time looked at the interaction between what we do on a daily basis and how it translates into brain health, how it expands our memory, how we actually feel about ourselves, and how we interact with each other on a daily basis. I had to list down the most important ones here because we don't have time to go over all of them, but just to kind of hint at the comprehensiveness of these studies. For example, the Rush University that conducted the Mind Diet study looked at 2,000 people since 1997. Framingham, 14,000 people since 1948. That's humongous. Women's health study, 10,000 participants since 1993. Adventist health study, we actually went to Loma Linda to study the population because they had the least number of people who had Alzheimer's disease compared to age-matched and geographic populations. 96,000 people studied over 50 years. California teacher study, where I'm actually doing research on Alzheimer's and stroke prevention, 133,000 participants since 1997. And Washington Heights Columbia project, over 5,000 people since 1998. So these are not small studies. These are not case series. These are people that have been followed for decades and have given us information about this importance of lifestyle. Just to give you an example, this study was published in 2019, and they looked at a pool of population who had the genetics for Alzheimer's disease or for dementia. Dean went over the genes with you all. So these people had the genes, and when they looked at their risk of developing dementia, they had 60% higher risk compared to people who didn't have those genes. However, if they had an unhealthy lifestyle, that risk was increased by 360%. That's the profound effect of an unhealthy lifestyle on our genes. It's almost as if we choose an unhealthy lifestyle, it activates or challenges those bad genes that we live with, and it increases our proclivity for developing dementia. And if the same people opted for a healthy lifestyle, their risk fell down to less than 30%, which essentially means that if we adhere to a healthy lifestyle, it can offset our genetic risk. And we were asked by the American Journal of Lifestyle Medicine and Journal of Family Practice and some other organizations to write comprehensive reviews on this important topic, to look at the comprehensive and the multifaceted nature of our lifestyle and its effect on brain health. So, to that end, we came up with an acronym called NEURO, and this is based on about 15 years of research and study and seeing patients in clinic, in the communities. And we made this acronym to make sure that people remember the important lifestyle factors that are associated with better brain health. N stands for nutrition, E stands for exercise, U stands for unwind or stress management, R stands for restorative sleep, and O stands for optimizing cognitive activity. And we'll take some time to go over the details of what these essentially mean. Now, nutrition is incredibly important. It's the most important internal environment that we create. You grab a fruit, or your decision of grabbing a donut determines how your internal environment is. It actually affects 4 different processes: inflammation, oxidation, regulation of glucose metabolism, and regulation of fat or lipid metabolism. Every meal that we eat affects these processes, and it either creates an environment for your brain to thrive, you're living in the thrive mode, or you create an environment where you're always in damage control mode. So these small little choices every day that we make affects our brain health long term. In the world of research and science, there was a time when we all focused on specific foods. Walnuts are great for you, or blueberries are great for you. Yeah, they're great, but we don't eat walnuts. That's not the only thing we eat. We eat food. And it's between the interaction and the synergy between different foods that we see either benefit or harm. So the tendency now is to look at dietary patterns. And we looked at specific dietary patterns, and the one dietary pattern that has been associated with better brain health and reduction of risk of Alzheimer's disease is the MIND diet. MIND is an acronym. It stands for Mediterranean-Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay. That's a mouthful, so MIND diet. It was created by scientists at Rush University, and it focuses on specific types of foods and dietary patterns that are beneficial for the brain. What does it have? It's essentially plant predominant. So it has greens, beans, cruciferous vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. And it's less in saturated fats and in refined carbohydrates, junk food, processed foods, etc. And the studies are just remarkable. The one study that looked at the MIND diet found out that when people adhere to the MIND diet, it reduced the risk of Alzheimer's disease by 53%. 53%. And of course, they adjusted for all the other lifestyle factors that can confound this variable: exercise, menopause in women, estrogen status, smoking, etc., stress. Adjusting for all those lifestyle factors still showed that diet mattered this much. 53% reduced risk. We don't have any medication that does that. And there's so many other studies. And we've looked at specific dietary patterns, and they all have shown us that when people adhere to a healthier diet, to a Mediterranean or Mayan diet, they reduce their risk of Alzheimer's disease. And this actually affects other spectrums of the disease as well. Cognitive decline, stroke, vascular dementia, Parkinson's disease. Over and over again, we've had this data come to us. Let's talk a little bit about supplementation, because everybody's looking for a quick fix, unfortunately. If you stay up late at night, and I hope you don't, but if you do, and if you turn on to your TV, there's always an infomercial about that pill that is made from jellyfish somewhere in the Amazon forest. And if you start taking that, you're going to fix all of your problems, and you're going to have the most brilliant brain.
But that's an amazing jellyfish in the Amazon forest.
I know. I wish it was true. But it's not. And when you look at the scientific literature, yes, it is very important to keep our eyes on specific micronutrients like vitamin B, B12 specifically, but B vitamins in general, folic acid, vitamin D. If you keep your eye on it and get tested at least once a year, and your doctor should be able to do it if you have health insurance that's covered by it, and replace it if it's needed, those are important. But the rest, you can get it from your diet. Science and research has shown us that things like vitamin C, vitamin E, and other minerals can be received from food, then supplement. And it seems that if you get it from food, it affects your brain health positively more than taking a pill. There is one particular supplementation or food item that is very important, and this came from 2 systematic reviews that Dean and I conducted a couple of years ago, and that's omega-3 fatty acids. It's a polyunsaturated fat. It's a type of polyunsaturated fat, and specifically DHA is very important. 57% of our brain is DHA, and this is needed by our brain on a regular basis. And it seems to be very important at 2 bookends of our life, during childhood and over the age of 65, and especially if people tend to have some memory problems. If they start forgetfulness, it's very important to be replaced. Now, this can be provided through diet from marine organisms like fish or algae-based foods. But also, if people are not getting enough of it, they can supplement with it. So fish oil or algae-based omega-3 fatty acids are just fine. So just to summarize what we know as far as the importance of food for brain health is concerned, it's essentially a Mayan or a Mediterranean diet that is unprocessed. It's plant-centered, so it's mostly plant-based. Polyunsaturated fats are more important. Reducing saturated fat is incredibly important because people who consume saturated fats have higher risk of Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. Plant proteins from lentils, beans, and soy products. Complex carbohydrates. Carbs are not bad. Everybody's vilifying carbohydrates, but there are different types of carbohydrates. Complex carbohydrates are great. Actually, glucose is the main fuel for brain health. Focusing on increasing fiber and making sure that we are getting enough DHA. Let's talk about exercise. Now, the one organ that benefits the most from exercise, we always think about our cardiovascular health and heart, but the brain benefits from exercise tremendously. And we've seen from different studies that when people exercise on a regular basis, they actually have bigger brains. Their brain cells have more connections, and they have specific types of growth hormones that actually help these connections continuously be made, whether they're 9 years old or 99 years old. So it's in our control. There's more blood supply, there's better regulation of glucose metabolism and fat metabolism, and over a long period of time, people who exercise and are physically active have reduced risk of stroke and other neurodegenerative diseases as well. This study is my favorite, and I wanted to show it to you all. So they looked at the effect of resistance training. We all talk about cardiovascular exercises, but resistance training or lifting weights is very important. So they subjected a group of people who had mild cognitive impairment, which is a prelude to dementias. And they essentially had a trainer teach them how to lift weights 2 to 3 times a week for about 6 months compared to a control group. 47% of them were able to reverse their mild cognitive impairment, and they remained disease-free for the next 18 months, even if they didn't exercise. That's the profound effect of exercise. And the funny, well, not the funny, but the most interesting part of the study was that leg exercises and having more muscle in your legs correlated with a bigger brain. So bigger thighs, bigger brain, bigger legs, bigger brain. Maybe that should be a title of another book.
Next book.
Great. So lunges, squats, and that it makes sense because our biggest muscles are in our legs, and if we really build a lot of leg muscles, we actually increase the size of the hippocampus. This study was from the Framingham longitudinal study, one of the longest running studies. People who walked for 20 minutes, just a daily brisk walk, reduced their risk of Alzheimer's disease by 40%. Just a daily brisk walk. It's incredible to see the effect. Now let's talk about stress.
Before we talk about stress, look at those two things. Nutrition and exercise, 53%, and that's suboptimal. We are talking about 80 to 90% of Alzheimer's being prevented, but we're talking about optimal lifestyle. When Mind Study looked at nutrition, it was actually their optimal was not the optimal that we talk about, which is a plant predominant, incredibly low saturated fat, incredibly low processed sugars. Imagine what that will do for you. Exercise, 40%, brisk walk, 20 minutes a day. That's remarkable. Yet we don't have a single drug that does 1%. Earlier today, somebody asked about all these pills that they're selling, and I'll be very blunt, as I am usually. None of them have shown 1% result in a meaningful study. Meaningful study means a third party and a replication. That's it, third party and a replication. Not a single one, yet a brisk walk, 40% reduction. Why isn't that in front page of every magazine? Because nobody can make money from it. That's just remarkable. Stress is the third element. Stress is the central component of our work because if you don't manage stress, you're going to go from the New Year resolution to the New resolution. That's a hard one. You go from diet to diet because stress breaks all these things apart. But we look at stress a different way. There's good stress and bad stress. The brain, 87 billion neurons, 1 quadrillion connections. Why? For finding food and finding a mate? Really? No, it's more than that. The brain is a pattern recognition machine. It lives to find patterns. It lives to be creative. It lives to push itself. Without that, it shrinks. In fact, as I'll show later, the population that had the greatest decline were a population that were highly active throughout life, this population. And then they retired. And then for a few years, they didn't do anything. More than food, more than exercise, more than anything else, guess what? They had the steepest decline because the brain wants to be challenged. That's the good stress. Push yourself, and I'll get to what that means. So bad stress, nobody's defined these things, and it's critical to define these things. In our house, we have 2 teenagers, and we have a whiteboard a wall is a whiteboard, and write things about stress, specifically and measurably. Bad stress is the kind of activities that don't have clear direction, clear timelines, and clear successes, and are not driven by your purpose. You can do that for a while for another purpose, but it can't be the driver of all your life. That's bad stress. So you have to identify it, figure out how to delegate, reduce, and eliminate. Literally, the most important life strategy that you can give to your children or yourself. Good stress, this is life. Good stress is when it's purpose-driven, it has direction, semi-direction, doesn't have to be perfect, it has measurable outcomes, and it has victories. That's what drives dopamine. Everywhere in social media, everybody's talking about dopamine, and nobody knows what it does. Dopamine is not the satisfaction, it's the drive towards satisfaction. And it's the thing that actually drives the ship of emotion, not serotonin. That's a separate talk. But this is the critical factor. Identify the purpose, identify the direction measurably, and put your life in that direction, and the brain will grow. And the studies have shown that whether you're, like Ayesha said, 9-year-old or 9-year-old, your brain will grow. That's the only 2 things that grows your brain. Mental activity around your purpose, and good stress, and exercise. So that's a critical thing. Then, and then the third factor is the language you carry. There are times that you can't manage stress, right? We used to drive from Redondo Beach, because we like to live on the beach, and go to Loma Linda, so that's a 2-hour drive, every day back and forth, and she had to live with me in the car for 2 hours back and forth. So you have to have language that mitigates the thing that actually causes stress that you can't control. That language matters. The language that you carry with you is profoundly important, and that is a stress manager, and that's a component. Now, before we get to sleep, those 3 factors, if not managed, will destroy any dietary pattern or any exercise program. So it's critical that we start looking at stress in a measurable and manageable way.
Sleep. So those 7 or 8 hours of sleep are probably the most important time for our brain, more than going to school and more than interacting with everybody else. There was a time when we just put it in the back burner, and me as a physician or as a medical student, we would take pride in not needing sleep and functioning the next day. But now we know how important those 7 to 8 hours are. The brain goes through about 4 or 5 cycles of sleep, and it actually ranges from being awake to mildly asleep and deep sleep. The deep sleep stage, or the N3 stage, is the most important time because 2 very important things happen during those stages. The first thing that happens is we have a very complex and an elegant system that cleanses the brain. It's called the glymphatic system. It's made out of these cells called microglia and a fluid system that essentially acts like a janitorial system coming into a building at night and just washing the brain away, getting rid of all the debris and the byproducts. And unfortunately, if we don't go to the deeper stages of sleep, the glymphatic system doesn't get activated. And over time, all of these byproducts accumulate. These byproducts also include amyloid beta protein, which have been associated with development of Alzheimer's disease. So chronic sleep problems can lead to the destruction of neurons and the connections between them. The second thing that happens is our memories get organized and they get consolidated during the deeper stages of sleep. That's why we tend to do better in memory tests, or students do better in examinations if they've slept better. So there's short-term benefits and there's long-term benefit for memory and recollection and processing and being the best version of who we are after good, deep restorative sleep. Now, sleep hygiene is an enormous topic, but it's very, very important to essentially include that in our day-to-day life. A lot of people seek medications, and we're not against medication. I prescribe medication for sleep disorders all the time, but long-term period, it should definitely be sleep hygiene. If you had to categorize the different elements of sleep hygiene, they fall in 4 different groups. Addressing environmental factors, which include sound, light, temperature, and things of that nature. Nutrition is incredibly important. The fact that when we eat, what we eat affects our energy levels and it affects our neurons. So not drinking caffeine at least 8 hours before bedtime, not drinking alcohol. Sometimes people take some nightcaps thinking that they can sleep better, but alcohol prevents us from going into the deeper stages of sleep. It keeps us at the superficial stage of sleep. And of course, so many other factors as far as nutrition is concerned as well. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a technique to help people to dissociate thinking or worrying when they go to bed. A lot of us, when there's absolutely no noise, it's the end of the day, your head hits the pillow and all of the different thoughts magnify in your head and you can't stop thinking. So cognitive behavioral therapy actually helps us dissociate from that, and it's a magnificent process and a procedure for people to get better restorative sleep. And then probably the most important thing is identification of sleep problems and sleep disorders. Conditions like sleep apnea have become an epidemic, and it's not necessarily seen after the ages of 50. They've actually been seen in younger individuals as well. So sleep apnea is a condition where you essentially stop breathing, and when you stop breathing during sleep, your oxygen levels start tanking. And then when it gets to, it's supposed to be 100%, but once it gets to the mid 80% or lower 80%, your brain essentially wakes you up. So when people have sleep apnea, they could wake up multiple times without even opening their eyes, 30, 40, 50, 60 times a night, and never go to the deeper stages of sleep. Yeah, CPAP machine is horrible. People are very uncomfortable with it, but it definitely needs to be addressed. And they've done studies that show that when people have sleep apnea and they don't treat it, their risk of Alzheimer's disease goes up by 70%. So we've started this narrative and this conversation with primary care physicians, nurse practitioners, people in the community to tell each other and remind people that if you do have sleep apnea, you have to address it. And the same goes for things like restless leg syndrome. Optimize.
So, as I said earlier, challenging your brain is as critical as everything else. It's important that challenge starts earlier. When you're younger, when you're in your first few years of life, what you're developing is the cognitive connections, the neuronal connections. Those neuronal connections are dependent on environment and lifestyle as well, significantly for that matter. And there's a point at age 4 or 5 where there's a pruning, apoptosis, cell death, where the brain actually loses a lot more cell. And the ultimate infrastructure that's left behind is called brain reserve. That's what you're left with. We now know that that system is partly driven by genetics, but tremendously driven by environment. Even IQ tests have shown in international studies that there are certain regions in the world, they've done studies, where IQ points were raised by 20 points. IQ was raised by 20 points by simple interjection of certain educational mechanisms, nutritional components, and that raised IQ by 20 points. So those first few years is called brain reserve. But then what happens thereafter, especially in your teen years and in early 20s, is myelination and neuronal connection. That's determined by stress, again, tremendously important how stress affects the brain throughout life. And then also how the brain is challenged as they're growing up. That determines that connectivity, the highways of the brain, and the myelination as well. The myelination is also affected by the nutrition that you consume during those early years. And what you're left behind in those early 20s is cognitive reserve. That cognitive reserve, as you will see, is your protection. That cognitive reserve is something that's critical that we actually develop throughout life. And it doesn't end in your 20s. You can develop it well into your 90s. So the cognitive reserve is the plasticity, synaptic connection. It's what gives us the resilience to withstand the microvascular disease, the small little strokes that happen later in life. All of these things will be affected by that connectivity. There are many studies that have been done. We've been involved, and I'll speak about one of those. But one interesting study is the London taxi driver study. This is pre-GPS. This is where, how many have been to London? Yeah, yeah. So London is not like Chicago. It's not Rush Street, Clark Street. It's pretty complex. Imagine learning to drive a taxi, every street, every household in London.
Without GPS.
Without GPS. I would definitely be lost. So they compared London taxi drivers before and after testing and bus drivers. The bus routes are simple, it doesn't need memorization. They did imaging, neuropsychological testing, pre and post, and what they found was remarkable. These are not young people. It was across the age spectrum. And what they found that in almost all of them, the taxi drivers actually had a growth in their hippocampus and frontal lobe. And their cognitive capacity actually increased. So this was one of those studies that it was an aha moment. Okay, you can actually increase your cognitive capacity and brain size by challenging around a purpose. Guess what? The bus drivers followed the trajectory of aging. And they not only did not increase, but actually had a slight decline. The other interesting study is the nun study. How many people here know about the nun study? It's a very interesting study. A large group of nuns dedicated their time, their blood, their tests, imaging, as well as their writings, their diaries. And after they died, they had autopsies of their brain. In one group, they found that the brains of this one group was inundated with vascular disease and degenerative disease. Inundated. Yet prior to that, they were normal cognitively. In another group, there was much less vascular and degenerative disease, yet prior to that, they had dementia. What was the difference? So they looked at all the other variables. In research, you look at all the confounds, all the factors, because the richer the data, the larger the sample, the more likely you can figure out if there's a confound. And what they found was the only major factor that was different was in their diaries, their language, their vocabulary, idea density. Ayesha is a great musician. Another thing she's better at than me at. She's also a culinary artist. And I'm trying to learn guitar. It doesn't get worse than me. But complex activities like that create cognitive reserve. So this population actually showed us that the language in your brain, the complexity of thoughts in your head, your vocabulary, how you actually pushed your brain, protected you in spite of vascular and degenerative disease. So we did a study in 2018, a meta-analysis. We were co-directors of Brain Institute and Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles. And we looked at all the data. We were fortunate. They sent us the data. We looked at all the data. And at the core, we found 3 very, very important factors: purpose, complexity, and challenge. Purpose comes to stress component I told you about. When people lived around the things that made them happy, around the activities that were challenging and meaningful to them, they did better. When people did complex real-life activities, they did better. What do I mean by that? Sudoku is great. I hate it. I tell you that, but it's fine. But playing guitar is different. Learning to dance is different. Volunteering is different. Running a company is different. Learning a new language is different. Going to places and testing out your language is different. All these complex real-life activities challenge multiple domains of your brain. Let's take playing guitar, my thing. I cause dementia in others, but it's okay. But I think my brain is growing. So when you're playing guitar, you're reading the language, the notation. That's your left parietal lobe, your Wernicke's and Broca's. That's growing. You're being intuitive and processing it. Cognitive, that's frontal lobe. You're visually processing it. It's occipital lobe. You're being creative. It's your parietal lobe. You're being dexterous. It's your motor cortex. And your limbic system, and your basal ganglia. You're emotionally involved. That's your limbic and emotional system. That's not Sudoku. That's your brain on fire. So complex behaviors matter because it also puts in the emotional component and involves all of your brain. And challenge means push your brain. So if you learn guitar and one song with 4 chords, which is most of my Beatles knowledge, go to 5 chords. Go to 6 chords. If you're learning a language and it's 20 words, learn 40 words. Whatever you're doing, keep pushing yourself to the next level. And no app, maybe in the foreseeable future with AI, but nothing can give you where you should be in the next stage better than you. So keep pushing yourself. Don't settle. Don't rest. It's your brain demands challenge around your purpose, and that grows your brain more than anything else. So the takeaway in all of this is simple. You can unleash the brain capacity with a systematic, small lifestyle changes. There's no gimmick. There's no one vitamin. There's not even one great food. I'll tell you one superfood. We don't believe in superfoods, but you know what the superfood is? And you don't see any commercials on TV about this superfood that improves your brain health by 11 years. Massive study. 11 years. You know what that is? Greens. How can you sell anything with greens? If you have 1 serving of greens a day, your brain improves by 11 years. Of course, more complexity to that than just that, but greens, simple things. A morning walk. We love morning walks for multiple reasons. As far as it's resetting the sleep cycle, a stress cycle, anxiety cycle. It's a behavior that you can build other behaviors around because it's a simple dopamine pathway because dopamine works on movement and motivation. Amazing. Just those 2 activities, small systematic approaches, you've just reduced your risk by 80%. Greens, vegetables, reducing saturated fat, and a walk. You're welcome. Yeah. I'll sell those later on. And be proactive. Don't wait for memory disorders. The sooner you start, the more you can do to build the infrastructure that holds up consciousness. I'm not going to get philosophical here, but the meta-consciousness. It's the infrastructure that holds it. If there's less pillars, much easier for the infrastructure to fall down. Build that infrastructure through these things. And it's not one of them. It's all of them. But the simple thing is one small success at a time. Simple success at a time. Because habits are built with simple steps. And it's not 21 days, whoever made that up, or 10,000 repeats. And there's no failure. Take a process, measurably, systematically. You guys know the SMART goals. I don't have to go over the SMART goals. Specific, measurable, achievable. And then achieve that, then go to the next thing. And the effects are profound. We do this in our populations and throughout the country. And we see the effect immensely, without any gimmicks, without any selling of vitamins, with simple, measurable things. And then you work and you live around vitality and not disease. And you don't have to worry about disease. Yes, there is the 3 to 5% that is genetically driven, but the great majority can, at the minimum, push it back 5 to 10 years, at the maximum, avoid it altogether. So with that, these are our 2 books. I guess we have to advertise the books, and the next one is coming fairly soon. This is how you can contact us. And we have massive research going on throughout the country, and it's at the population level. And we do it with multiple domains: lifestyle, and nutrition, exercise, and the whole neuro concept, and then measuring outcomes to see what comes about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'd be happy to take some questions. Yes.
Does intermittent fasting have any statistical correlation with brain health?
Great question.
Great question.
Does intermittent fasting have any correlation with brain health? To the best of our knowledge today, there are not a lot of long-term studies in large populations for us to have the confidence to say yes. They've been tested in smaller populations in case series, and the bulk of the work was done on animal research. And as you may know, a lot of things have been done in animals, but it never really translates in human beings. So far, there is a trend. It seems that the component that is more important than the intermittent fasting is reduction of calories in general. When people have less calories, they tend to do better. They actually make the senescence genes quiet, so they don't age faster. But we hope to learn more about it. Yes?
Have you reviewed this with anybody in the government as far as, have you reviewed this with anybody in the government as far as setting up a healthy lunch program for children?
Yes, yes, we have. So
We have.
We have spoken with AARP, we have spoken with the Alzheimer's Association, with the California Department of Public Health, and through our non-for-profit Healthy Minds Initiative, we're initiating multiple projects in the community, especially in southern Los Angeles areas, looking at different socioeconomic statuses and making sure that people are aware. And one of the most successful projects that we're conducting is training trainers. Trust comes from people that are within the community. A lot of universities and doctors go to different communities, they have brochures, and it's a very top-down model. Do as I tell you and I'm gone. And unfortunately, it doesn't work. So training trainers and having that conversation on a regular basis until it becomes culture is what we're focusing on.
But as far as the children, we think it's the most important thing we can do as far as brain health is concerned. Later on, anxiety, everything else, approaching it this way, and would love to have some programs started, absolutely.
Yes.
Sorry.
I'm interested in longevity, especially for baby boomers born between 1946 and 1964. And I give a talk exactly like yours, because to me, the same factors contribute to longevity that contribute to brain health. However, I have 3 other components that I try to promote, and I'm just interested in your opinion. The first is sense of community, and Loma Linda is certainly a wonderful place to look at that. The second is the sense of spirituality, because I think that's very important to people. You want to make any comments to me, please?
What's the third one?
Keep having sex.
Yes. Okay. The third one, yes. The third one, yes. No, I'm sorry, second one, no. No, but yes, of course, if you can. I mean, that's the rub on that. As far as the rest, spirituality, I think it speaks to purpose. So however you connect to purpose, it matters. There isn't great data. We're plant-based, we're vegans, but we never push that concept because we do, but we don't say that it's either this way or no way. For example, the data on fish is good. We say you can get the same omega-3 from, I know the studies show, from algae-based or other ways as well. So data is not very strong with that. The data is stronger on purpose. So purpose is a better thing to build around, right? And community, absolutely. Community, we just did a podcast with the 2 that wrote the book on happiness from Harvard. And the sense of connectivity is incredibly important. And that's, the Optimize is part of that. Connecting with people is critical. Now, it could be a community, it could be one person, it could be a partner, it could be your children, it could be, but that 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 meaningful connections matter tremendously.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And in fact, it's one of the most important forms of cognitive activity. When I talk to you, it's not just talking. I have to listen to you. I have to measure your emotions, think what you're saying. All this involves all of the brain, way more than Sudoku. I'm going to hit on Sudoku until it goes out of
right.
business.
So I'll take one from this
No,
side,
she
and
was-
then you can. All right,
yeah,
sorry.
sorry.
I was just wondering about meditation, because I've been reading a lot about it, and that it's so good for your brain. So
Which medication?
meditation.
Meditation, yes. Meditation is important. It speaks to stress. We actually had a whole slide that this could be fun. We've done actually a whole day session. So the meditation is incredibly important as far as stress management. But the way we approach meditation, whether you do transcendental, which we did in our study in Cedars-Sinai, or anything else, it's about that state of awareness of your sympathetic and parasympathetic system. I don't need to make it anything more than that. You can. Being aware of your pulse, your breath, being aware of how to manage the stress, and taking that 3 minutes. Ayesha and I drove to Loma Linda, and then afterwards she would say, get out of the car. And she would meditate for 5 minutes in the car, mindful breathing. It's then taking that state of awareness into your life and making it part of your life. That's the critical factor. That state of being aware of the stressors, your body's stressors, your sympathetic overdrive, which we're all living on. In the past, that wasn't the case. Now we've actually transferred it from running away from the tiger to the fact that I can't pay the bills. So now it's across the board. Taking that into real life is what's important to us. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes.
Before my question, can you put your books back?
Yes.
Good advertising, right?
Of course.
Yeah, I didn't take a picture.
you do that?
Why are you picking on Sudoku so much? I like.
Because
I
I'm
know.
terrible at it.
No, because
I told him.
play chess.
I told him,
and
like,
I-
pick something
play
else.
chess, I play backgammon, I play everything and I heard it's good for my brain.
It's the Sudoku cult is a dangerous cult that we must eliminate. I'm joking. Sudoku is great. I'm just terrible at it. That's why I'm picking. Because my kids and we always play these games at home, and they always beat me in Sudoku. So I said I'm going to bash Sudoku all the
Oh,
time.
my game is. I'm talking about games in general, like that chess.
No, it's
and-
fun.
They're great, yeah.
I'm a big chess aficionado. I love chess, and all those are great. Absolutely.
Thank you.
But I think the point was, all of these games, they involve a particular aspect of our brain rather than the entire brain. So it's just calculation, or it's just visual spatial. And real life activities involve all of these domains, which is more important. Yes.
Then you. Then her.
I thought your talk was fantastic.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
As a family that's dealing with Alzheimer's, it's super helpful to get it in one amazingly informative hour. My question's around dietary intervention. So two things, like say greens as an example. Does it matter the method of consumption? I.e., if you take a green juice every morning versus eating a salad, one's obviously easier to effectuate, so that's one question. The second is this interplay between muscle mass and a plant-based diet, and whether, and there's the Mediterranean diet on top of it, right? So like a Indian plant-based diet is very low in protein, therefore hard to build muscle. Is that necessarily bad relative to a Mediterranean diet? So that's...
Those are such great
I'll take the first
questions.
part of it.
Yes.
I just want to reemphasize this. We're living in a very weird time. Lots of people, charlatans, making money off of people's fears. People who have dementia in their family, they're desperate. We had two grandparents, and I remember I lived actually with my grandmother in the same room. I was taking care of her, and anything that anybody would say, we would do. And now there's TV and selling of things, and no pills, no vitamins, no concoctions is going to reverse Alzheimer's. We can improve their quality of life. We can do things to improve their emotions and all of that stuff. So that's a critical thing. I want everybody to be very diligent about this because there's a lot going out there. And we're not, we say greens, that's it. You can buy our books or not buy our books, that's okay, but greens basically, and other stuff. And the form of greens, you're better at
Yeah,
that.
so as far as the different forms of food are concerned, so does it matter? Yes and no. It matters when it comes to specific types of food that release their nutrients more when they are processed. For example, hard root vegetables. I mean, there's this movement about raw, food and diet. And when you look at it, when you actually cook some foods, their micronutrients become more evident and more available. For example, sweet potatoes actually have 200% more bioavailability of vitamin A when they're boiled. Or, for example, tomato sauce is better than fresh tomatoes because lycopene is more available. I mean, I could go on and on, but not very much. So just enjoy it. the way you enjoy it and consume it as much as you can do. As far as protein is concerned, yes, it is becoming more apparent to us that we have to be aware. We have to be protein aware. And for people who are on a plant-based diet, for them to have enough protein. Now, the numbers are still questionable. There are some series that show that if you are an athlete, not a competitive athlete, but if you want to build muscle and be strong, having at least 1 gram of protein per kilograms of body weight is important. How do you get that on a plant-based diet? There are ways to kind of modify that. But then when you look at large observational studies from the blue zones, for example, people living in Loma Linda or Ikaria, Greece, or in Okinawa, Japan, they never really ate a lot of protein, but they lived well into their 80s, 90s, 100s, and beyond. So there's that discrepancy. And I think it's just important for us to be aware of it and not, I guess, fuss too much about it.
One last question.
I guess.
Why are so many Alzheimer's patients prescribed Prevagen?
Yeah.
They're not prescribed Prevagen. It's not from a medical community. They take Prevagen. Yeah, because it's a good marketing. Very good marketing.
Great PR.
Great PR. None.
One study that showed that they felt better. And when you look at the gold standard neuropsychological battery of testing that shows how you do in memory, there was no significant difference between the placebo group and the active group. Just good marketing and PR.
Yes. And then,
Sorry to be again here. You mentioned genes a lot. And genes would be just the fact that I have some ancestral that has it, or if the fact that my ancestor had it doesn't mean I do have the gene. And then how could I know?
I'll answer the second question first. Just a few years ago, we would say, don't even check your ApoE4, for example. Don't even check, because if you have it, what are you going to do about it? All it does is, like, we have 2 grandparents. We probably have the ApoE, then now I forget the key all the time, or this or that, and I attribute it to me being busy. If I know my genes, guess what? It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh, it's the Alzheimer's, it's the Alzheimer's, it's the Alzheimer's. It creates anxiety, especially if you can't do anything. The thing you can do is live healthfully, irrespective. Assume risk and live healthfully, because that's going to help you cardiovascular, psychological, neurological, everything. So that's it. But now we think that there's some evidence that, for example, omega-3, the amount of omega-3 you need to consume is higher in those who are ApoE4. So right now, we're going that direction a little bit. I can't even speak to that yet as a scientist, but we might be getting to a point where knowing our genes would matter. As far as how you got the genes, either you get it from your grandparents or your lineage, or sometimes it's spontaneous. So a lot of genetic diseases that have genetic lineage actually happen spontaneously as well. So either way, it can happen. Yeah. Yes.
So for a lot of people in the workforce, right, your body gets accustomed to waking up at certain times, no matter what time you fall asleep. This is something that my dad always tells me. Like, he wakes up at 5:30 every day, no matter what, even if he goes to sleep at 1 a.m. So since sleep is so important, is there any way you can reverse that, like your brain being conditioned to wake up at the same time every day so that you can actually get the full amount of sleep?
You just took an entire 1-hour talk of ours, which is great. Your brain is pattern recognizer, right? One of the most important patterns it has had for millennia is when to go to sleep, when to wake up. Your melatonin cortisol cycle is based on that. Your stress cycle is based on that. Your happiness cycle is based on that. That's why depression and all that is linked to that. Everything is based on that cycle. So one of the first habits that we actually institute for sleep is learn to go to sleep the same time, wake up 8 hours later at the same time, no matter what happens. And don't take naps during the day. If you're going to take naps, don't take naps longer than 20 minutes, because then you go into the REM and all that, and that's going to alter night's effect. So at least set that pattern. That pattern is critical. Your brain recognizes it. Then what happens is your melatonin cycle locks into that. Your cortisol cycle locks into that. Everything locks into that. It's not the end-all, be-all, but it's a central thing. Thank you for asking that question. And then we add the environmental thing, the food elements, the cognitive behavioral therapy, where we've all learned, we've been conditioned to, when you go to bed, to worry. And now bed becomes a stimulus for worry. So you have to break that cycle. Whenever there's a worry, get off the bed, have a red light, don't turn on the bright light. Write all your worries on a notebook, not in a manifesto form. Nothing good comes out of manifestos. Bullet forms. Put it next to your bed, go to sleep. In the morning, read it. I guarantee you it's a lot less worrisome in the morning than at night. But what happens after a while, it deconditions two things. Decouples the worry from bed and de-stresses that element. So there's a lot of things you can do, but the first thing is go to bed same time, wake up the same time 8 hours later.
I do have to say, though, sleep change takes the longest. It
Yes.
is the most difficult one, so people have to be very, very patient to be able to do that. It's not as quick as, well, not quick, but not as quicker as exercise.
We have two masters in nutrition. Exercise is the easiest one and the best one to start with. A morning brisk walk, sleep cycle, stress, anxiety, food, everything is affected by that.
I think we're out of time. We'll be standing in the corner if you have any questions. Thank you so much for your attention.